The hull of the vessel groans under 7 miles of salt water, but the radio is screaming. A rhythmic human pulse is bleeding through the static, transmitting from a trench where the pressure should crush steel like tin foil. You're 36,000 feet down, and something is calling your name from the abyss. Welcome, creepy souls. Tonight we're descending into the crushing black of the deep ocean, where the light dies and the air runs thin. We find the things that should have stayed submerged. The pressure is rising, and the shadows are hungry. First, a research team picks up a signal from a depth that defies physics, but stay for our final descent. A saturation diver trapped in a pressurized pod realizes there's a silhouette tapping on the thick glass outside. No gear, no oxygen tank, just a pale, bloated face staring back from the freezing dark, waiting for the airlock to open. Turn off the lights, and let's dive in. The world at 500 feet below the surface isn't blue. It's a thick, oily black that feels heavy against the reinforced glass of the saturation habitat. My name is Elias, and for the last 3 weeks, my world has been a pressurized metal cylinder the size of a school bus. Life in SAT is a repetitive cycle of compressed air and the high-pitched Donald Duck voices caused by the heliox-breathing gas. You eat, you sleep, and you wait for your shift to go out into the abyss to weld pipes. The air inside smells like wet neoprene, metallic sweat, and recycled oxygen. It's boring. It's meant to be boring. In this job, exciting usually means you're about to die. I was sitting in the galley, nursing a cup of lukewarm broth. The habitat was quiet, save for the constant, low-frequency hum of the life support scrubbers. I looked at the small, thick porthole facing the exterior gantry. Everything was normal. Then I felt a sudden, localized chill. In a pressurized habitat where the temperature is strictly controlled to 30 degrees Celsius, to prevent hypothermia, a cold draft is impossible. Yet, the back of my neck prickled. I noticed a faint smudge on the outside of the glass, like a greasy handprint, but we were hundreds of feet down. Nothing has hands out there. My crewmate, Marcus, was asleep in the upper bunk. I was the only one awake for the midnight monitoring shift. I checked the external monitors. The floodlights illuminated a small patch of the seabed, showing the jagged silhouette of the pipeline. As I glanced at the monitor for camera 4, which faces the airlock entry, I saw a flicker. A diver was standing on the grate. He was wearing the standard deep-sea hard suit, the Iron Mike style. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, tethered to nothing, staring directly into the lens. My heart gave a dull thud against my ribs. Thump thump. I checked the manifest. No one was scheduled for an excursion for another 4 hours. "Marcus," I whispered, my voice squeaking in the thin air. No answer. I looked back at the screen. The diver was gone. There were no bubbles, no silt kicked up from the seafloor, just the empty, rusted metal of the gantry. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a reflection of the internal cabin lights against the dark water. But deep down, I knew reflections don't have shadows. An hour later, the clanging started. Clang, clang, clang. It was rhythmic, slow, and deliberate. It sounded like a heavy wrench hitting the exterior hull. Pressure differential, I muttered to myself, just the metal expanding. I tried to focus on my logs, but my hands were shaking so hard, the pen left jagged lines on the paper. I checked the external pressure sensors, 16 atmospheres, perfectly stable. Then the intercom crackled. It's a closed-loop system. It shouldn't activate unless someone presses the button in the diving bell. "Elias, let me in. It's cold." The voice was distorted by the helium, but it sounded exactly like mine. My breathing became shallow. My lungs felt like they were pulling in lead instead of air. I rushed to the porthole. Outside, floating just inches from the glass, was the diver. His faceplate was cracked. Inside the helmet, there was no face, just a swirling mass of dark, brackish water, and 2 pale human eyes that didn't blink. He raised a hand and pressed it against the glass, right where that greasy smudge had been. I backed away, tripping over a crate. "Marcus, wake up! Someone's outside!" I screamed. Marcus bolted upright, eyes bleary. He looked at the porthole, then back at me. "Elias, what are you talking about? The sensors say the exterior gantry is empty. There's no one out there." "Look at the glass." I pointed, my finger trembling. Marcus walked over. The glass was clear. The smudge was gone. "You're getting the rapture, man. Nitrogen narcosis. You need to breathe the pure O2 for a bit," Marcus said, reaching for the mask. But then, the habitat tilted. A massive weight had settled on top of our cylinder. We heard the sound of magnetic boots walking across the roof. Thud, thud, thud. Then came the sound that broke me. The manual override wheel on the outer airlock began to turn. Creak. It's a heavy mechanical sound that requires immense physical strength. Marcus froze. We both watched the inner hatch. The pressure gauge for the airlock chamber began to climb. Something was cycling the airlock. The smell of the room changed instantly. The recycled air was replaced by the overwhelming, sickly sweet stench of stagnant water and decaying fish. The temperature plummeted. I could see my breath frosting in the air. We were trapped in a metal can, and something was opening the lid. The inner hatch began to groan. A sliver of black, pressurized water started to seep through the seal, hissing like a snake. Behind the hiss, I heard the voice again, right behind my ear, even though Marcus was 10 feet away. "I'm back, Elias. I've been coming back for a long time." They pulled the habitat up 3 days later. They found Marcus catatonic, curled in a fetal position in the corner. They found me unconscious near the hatch. The official report says there was a slow leak in the heliox mix that caused shared hallucinations. They said the airlock never actually opened because the external pressure would have crushed us instantly. I wanted to believe them. I quit the industry, moved to a high-rise in the city, miles from the coast. But 2 nights ago, I was brushing my teeth when I heard it. Clang, clang, clang. It was coming from the pipes inside my walls. I looked in the mirror, and for a split second, my own reflection wasn't moving with me. It just stood there, staring, with eyes that looked a little too pale. And when I stepped out of the bathroom, I saw a trail of wet, salty footprints leading directly into my closet. I'm sitting in my living room now, staring at the closet door. It's a warm night, but I can see my breath misting in the air. Before we continue, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? The hum of the SS Argentum is a sound you don't hear with your ears. You feel it in your teeth. I've been a sonar technician for 12 years, and the ocean floor usually sounds like nothing. It's a vast, wet desert. My shift started at 2 o'clock. The air in the comms room was stale, smelling of ozone and lukewarm black coffee. Everything was routine. The gauges showed the external pressure at a staggering 16,000 pounds per square inch. Beyond the 3-inch titanium hull, there was enough force to turn a human body into a red mist in milliseconds. I focused on the boring rhythm of the thermal vents, but then I noticed the temperature gauge in the sub-ballast. It dropped 4 degrees in 10 seconds. Water at this depth doesn't just get colder. It was the first time I felt a genuine shiver, not from the air, but from the realization that something was absorbing the heat from the ship. I adjusted my headset, the leather damp against my skin. That's when I heard it. It wasn't the grinding of tectonic plates or the whistle of a thermal vent. It was a rhythmic, digital pulse. Beep, 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 pause, beep. I checked the depth. We were currently hovering over the Mariana Trench, a fissure recently discovered that plummeted another 6,000 feet below the known seabed. No man-made probe had ever touched the bottom. Yet, the signal was coming from directly beneath us. It was a radio frequency, RF, signal. That's physically impossible. Radio waves don't travel through miles of salt water. They die within feet. I stared at the visualizer. The waveform wasn't random noise. It was structured. It looked like a heartbeat, slow, steady, and mocking the laws of physics. My pulse started to mirror it. Thump, thump. I told myself it was just a feedback loop from the old wiring. "Captain, we've got a ghost signal," I whispered into the intercom. My voice sounded thin, alien to my own ears. He told me to recalibrate. I did, twice. The signal didn't just stay. It grew louder. Then came the audio translation. I filtered the hiss and the static. Underneath the roar of the abyss, I heard a voice. It wasn't a monster's roar. It was a woman's voice, distorted, sounding like it was being played through a broken music box. She was humming a lullaby, one my mother used to sing to me in a house 3,000 miles away. It's just a hallucination, I thought. Sensory deprivation, nitrogen narcosis. I gripped the edge of the console until my knuckles turned white. But then the external hull cameras flickered to life. Something was bumping against the exterior. Not a giant squid, not a shark. It was a pale, rhythmic tapping. Ting, 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 like a fingernail hitting a window. We were 7 miles down. There are no windows. There is no light. But on the monitor, in the faint glow of our floodlights, I saw a hand. A human hand, pressed against the titanium. The skin translucent and blue, its fingers elongated and ending in sharp, jagged bone. The lights in the comms room turned a deep bruised purple before failing entirely. The emergency red strobes kicked in. Whir, whir. I wasn't alone. The smell hit me first. Not the ozone of the ship, but the thick, choking scent of brine and old, rotting kelp. The air became heavy, like I was breathing liquid. I couldn't turn around. I knew if I turned, the reality of it would break my mind. I felt a coldness settle on my shoulder. It wasn't a hand. It felt like a block of ice shaped like a palm. I heard the wet squelching sound of footsteps on the metal floor behind me. Each step sounded like someone walking in shoes filled with water. The humming started again, right into the crook of my neck. It wasn't coming from the speakers anymore. It was coming from the dark corner of the room where the shadows seemed to be leaking out of the walls. I felt its breath. It didn't smell like air. It smelled like the pressurized ancient gas of an underwater grave. I closed my eyes, praying for the hull to burst, for the pressure to end it all. The research was canceled. The Argentum was decommissioned and welded shut in a dry dock in Virginia. They told me I had a psychotic break due to high-pressure nervous syndrome. I almost believed them. I live in a desert now. I moved to Arizona because I needed to be as far from the water as possible. I don't even keep a glass of water on my nightstand. But last night I woke up to a sound I've tried to forget. My bedroom was dry. The desert air was hot. But when I looked at the floor, there were wet, salt-crusted footsteps leading from my door to the edge of my bed. I turned on my phone to call for help, but there was no dial tone. Instead, through the tiny speaker, I heard that same rhythmic digital pulse. Beep, 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 pause. Beep, and then the humming. She didn't stay in the trench. She followed the signal home. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And tell us in the comments which part scared you the most, and drop your ideas in the comments. Your idea might be our next nightmare.